Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social Podcast for what basically is the second part of our World Championships preview. Today we are going to get you warmed up for the World Championships by providing you with 5 interviews with riders who are all participating in the Cyclocross World Championships. In chronological order, you will be hearing from Madigan Munro, Caleb Swartz, Ava Holmgren, Scott Funston and Ian Akert. All riders from North America that are racing relatively close to home and are looking forward to this championship. They will all be speaking about their own expectations for the race, their personal goals, the course, and a couple of other things that were on our mind when we were speaking with them. And that means that you are going to hear from every category except the elite woman one. We unfortunately couldn't find a rider that was willing to come on or that could fit it into her time schedule, so that's unfortunate, but still 5 riders, 5 previews, and we're going to start off by talking to the PanAmerican champion under 23 Madigan Munro in the under 23 category. That's where she will be racing in at the World Championships. Madigan, thank you for wanting to speak with us. Welcome on the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks a lot for wanting to speak with us. Could you shortly introduce yourself to our listeners who don't already know you?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Madigan or Maddie Munro. I'm 19 years old and I'm a rider for the Trek Factory Racing team on the mountain bike and cyclocross team.
You're from the United States. This year, the World Championships are going to be hosted there for the second time in the history of cyclocross. How special is that for you?
It's really special. I am so excited to have a home World Championships, mainly for the fact that so many friends and family can come out to watch and it's much easier for them to get to, and it will be great to have a US crowd there.
The previous World Championship in the USA were in Louisville. Was that something that was one of the reasons that you started doing cyclocross?
Not really, actually, at the time, I hadn't even been racing cyclocross or knew much about it, to be honest. I was still in the beginning years of my mountain bike racing, and in 2019, my coach had encouraged me to try cyclocross as a sort of training discipline and just to have something to do in the winter. And so I raced my first nationals in Louisville, actually. But yeah, when Worlds happened in Louisville, I had barely heard of the cyclocross scene at the time. So.
Now you've completely integrated into the cyclocross world, the cyclocross environment, and you are participating in the biggest event in that scene, the World Championships. They take place in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Earlier this year, you raced the World Cup there. It had a pretty similar course. What were the main things that stood out to you of the course? What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so it was a bit crazy for the World Cup actually, because the day of the race we had a ton of rain. So all week when we were practicing the course, it was very dry and very fast, almost like a road race, with one really short, punchy climb. So that was kind of the all-out effort of the lap. And then the day of the race, with all the rain, it changed so much and it became a very heavy mud race. And really, the mud just played a huge factor in the race. It was much slower and more of a bog and a lot more technical.
We're still far out, so the weather report is not out yet. But what would you prefer? Because we've heard people suggest that if it's dry, the course is too easy. Do you agree with that?
I wouldn't say it's too easy. I would just say it's going to be very different. I think maybe it's easy in the fact that it's not going to be as, like, the weather wouldn't play a factor. So that what would make it really hard is the high speed and having it be similar to a road race and having groups of riders pushing each other really hard versus maybe more of an individual race with the mud. I think either way, it's going to be a really hard race. So.
And for yourself, what would you prefer? Heavy rain, dry and fast, or maybe completely different conditions?
Actually, I love the mud. I love the muddier the better, the more rain. So I would definitely lean towards that side. Hmm.
Well, I think so far all Americans we've spoken with seem to prefer mud. Clara Honsinger and Katie Klaus also prefer mud, so I guess
Yeah.
the Americans will be hoping for rain there. But do you think that the weather conditions will influence the riders who we'll see at the front of the race?
I think it could play a factor to the race. I think there are definitely certain riders that have much more road experience, and so if it's a really fast course, they would be really well suited for the course, and others that are more of like they can ride heavy courses, put out a lot of power, but it's kind of a slog. And they're definitely more suited to that. So I could see the weather playing a bit of a factor versus who could have a really good day. Yeah.
And on this parcours, who do you think is the favorite in your category?
Oh, that's a good question. I think honestly, all three of the top Dutch riders that have been kind of dominating the U23 field this whole season, I really think any of them are super strong, very technically talented, and whether it's fast or muddy, could all have a good shot. I'd say any three of them could take it.
So then we are talking about Vic Peterson, Van Empel, and Sherin van Anrooy.
Yeah.
These riders have all been indeed at the top level in the elite races as well this year.
Mm-hmm.
But behind these riders, do you think that there are any dangerous outsiders for the title?
I think there's definitely some really strong riders out there. I know there's some really fast French women and an Italian that's really strong as well. And along with Katie Klaus, I think she's been riding well and has had some really good results and riding strong. So any of them could, on a really good day, have a good result as well.
If the parcours is fast, then we are more likely to see grouped racing. It could be potentially difficult to drop other riders. In a situation like that, we could see a tactical race. And I mean, being strong is one thing, but do you also think that these riders who've been racing at the front of the elite races will also have the tactical advantage over the riders who haven't done that because they have more experience in racing for the win?
I do agree. I think that experience takes you a long way. And if it is really fast, also any other riders that have a lot of road experience. For example, Katie Klaus, I know she's raced the Giro and a couple other big stage races with rally cycling. So anyone of that caliber could also have a really good tactical knowledge for the race.
Could obviously also make for perhaps some team tactics, although I don't expect that because usually it's a championship. But coming back to what I said, there's a couple of riders who've been fighting at the front of elite races. However, there's unfortunately no separate races for under 23 women category. Do you think that that's something that is a must in the future?
I would agree. Yeah, I think it's definitely needed to have a separate U23 category. I think especially we see it's already in the mountain bike scene. All the World Cups have U23 and junior, and I feel it would definitely be of importance to have one in cyclocross as well.
And does that then help the development for yourself? Because you needed to make the step from, well, you were actually part of the first ever junior women's world championship, but the year before, as a junior, you already had only a separate race at the world championships, but you were already racing against the elites, and that's a step that's already been made a bit smaller by having junior women world cup. But
Hmm.
would you think that it will encourage more girls to stay riding if we have a separate under 23 World Cup in the future?
I would hope so. I would think that having a separate U23 category would possibly encourage more juniors to stick with it because I know it can be really challenging going from as a junior woman and jumping into the elite field. I mean, honestly, like there are just finishing on the lead lap, it becomes a big goal for many of these riders. And I think having a U23 category would give them much more of a chance of racing to race and to win and be on podiums rather than just fighting to finish the race. So
One of the riders that was at the beginning of the season still in the under 23 category has made the decision that she is now going to race with the elites. Catablanca Vash, that is. What do you think about that decision from her?
I think that she is a really strong rider, and given that she's also been at the top of these elite races, I guess maybe for her it makes sense in her development to keep pushing herself and ride with the elite riders. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a very brave decision to make, and
Mm.
I do think that regardless of the course conditions, she knows how to peak. In the elite category, could get a medal, and it's a long list there. And the top three favorites in the under 23 category, I think that they all could score a medal at the World Championships in the elite category. I also understand their decision to race in this category. One of
Hmm.
them, Vic Peterson, you were racing with her for quite a while now, also in the mountain biking.
Yeah.
She was just ahead of you at the World Championships in Dubendorf. Is that something that is encouraging for you, that you think that you can potentially reach the same level as she has in the future?
Yeah, definitely. I think it is really encouraging to have known that I did ride really close to her at one point, and I know everyone takes the development in different stages and progresses at different speeds. So I am hopeful that I can reach that level in the future, and it's definitely one of my goals is to be at that top level. So just that is pretty motivating. Yeah.
And Peterson, I personally think that she would be the big favorite on this parcours because it does have a bit of technical features in some sections, but I think that she is going to be the big favorite based on her entire season because Van Empel had a bit of a dip at some point. Van Androoy had a slow start and then grew into the season. But Peterson, I think she's been the most consistent, and I mean all three would deserve the world title, but I think Peterson was the most consistent throughout the entire season.
Yeah, I agree. I think her having the leader's jersey for the World Cup overall all season has also proven something. I think that shows her consistency. And I do know she is a very talented technical rider, at least from just watching her ride and all the things she's posting on social and such. Yeah.
Mountain biking is also a very technical discipline, and you've raced with her there as well. Is that also somewhere where you've seen that technique?
Yeah, for sure. I think nowadays the World Cups just seem to be getting more and more technical every year. So I think just being able to ride one of those courses so well and you know, the way she can produce results in mountain biking, I think that shows a high level of technique as well.
And if we look at yourself for the World Championships, with what goal are you going to go there?
Well, I definitely have a couple goals. The number one goal would just be to ride my best physical and mental race. Being on form both physically and mentally, and whatever result that brings will be a big success in my mind. But as far as performance goals go, I think it is a little bit dependent on the conditions. I think if it plays into my favor and we have a muddy race, then a top five would be a very big stretch goal, but also one that could be achievable. And but a top 10 would also be a very big success for me, I think, as well.
Speaking about top 10s, when you came over to this side of the ocean, Belgium and the Netherlands, to do racing, you already got the top 10 in the X2O trophy in Herentals, and you just missed out in the final lap in Baal. Does that give you the confidence that it definitely is within your reach, a top 5 or certainly a top 10?
Yeah, I think that has all been motivating seeing the progression I've made since I first came over to Europe, racing my first two World Cups of Ruckven and Namur, and then progressing into top 10 in Herentals. That was very encouraging, especially with some of the fast women still racing. So, yeah.
Could you tell us a bit about how those races went for you? Because the broadcast only shows the front runners, but behind that, it's often very interesting.
Yeah, I think overall it was a great couple of weeks in Belgium and the Netherlands. I think I started off a bit behind, just especially at Ruckven being a really fast, pretty flat course. That was definitely a challenging one to jump off the plane and head into. But then I got to race some of my favorite courses, such as Namur. I really, really love that course and already started to see some better results there and had some good races. And I think overall, every race I did just got a little bit better, getting more used to the whole environment, the racing in Europe. Yeah, each one was a bit of a bigger step, so to speak.
Yeah, because racing in Europe is very different than racing in the USA. Would you then also think that Fayetteville is a more standout American type of parkour, or is it just a very atypical parkour in general?
That's a good question. I think it's a little bit of both, if that's possible. I think it's typical of American in the sense that it kind of has the same features, so to speak. Like it's hard to make it super technical, such as a place like Namur or even Herentals with the elevation and just the conditions of the soil and such. But I do think it is different because it's been a World Cup. There's some defining features like those big stairs that they put so much effort into building, and that hill is pretty strong too. So yeah.
And do you then think, because it includes some features that Americans are used to, that American riders are going to have a slight advantage over the Europeans, or will they adapt very quickly?
I think they'll adapt fairly quickly. I think it is one of those courses that is not it's definitely challenging, but it won't be something that riders will show up to and possibly won't be able to ride sections or will be really intimidated. I think it will be challenging, but not unrideable. Yeah.
Another thing that might benefit Americans is the jet lag. How will you be dealing with that? You're now in Spain for a training camp. How will your preparation look for the Worlds?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think partly skipping Hoogerheide is part of my jet lag preparation, not having to go to Hoogerheide and then deal with the jet lag back to the US. So going home a little bit early, having almost a week at home with my family and my dog, getting to kind of take a little breather there, that will help my preparation and also be a little bit of a physical break. I'll have some more of a taper week, so some shorter, harder intensity, but nothing long, and then flying to Fayetteville and getting ready to race.
Definitely looks good, and I mean, hopefully a top five is possible, and then we hope for the Americans that it rains. But the Dutch riders we've spoken with, some seem to hope that it's going to be dry, because if it's muddy, then I mean, bad luck is always around the corner, and it can happen to anyone. But yeah, we can just hope for the best. And if we look
Yeah.
at yourself, at your future, just a short look ahead for. Is it still going to be your goal to be combining cyclocross with mountain biking in the future?
I would really love to. I think I have a really strong passion for both disciplines. But that being said, I think because mountain biking is an Olympic sport, and that's definitely one of my dream goals, it might be it come the future that I have to spend a couple seasons purely focusing on mountain biking. But I hope to always be able to return to cross or fit it in whenever I can, and even some road racing if possible as well.
Think it's definitely proven that it's possible to combine the disciplines. Evie Richards, I mean, this year she needed to take a winter off, unfortunately, but for the rest, she always combines a somewhat shorter campaign in cyclocross with a good mountain bike season. I mean, this year she became world champion and also was just strong throughout the entire season. And we see Vic Peterson is going for the same approach. Also, she's aiming for the Paris Olympics. Is that also a big goal for yours to participate in the 2024 Olympics in Paris?
Yeah, I would say that's definitely one of my big goals.
Well, I hope that that's all going to work out then. A final question on the Fayetteville World Championships. If you need to predict the podium and the place for yourself, what would you go with?
Mm. Well, I want to say first place, but that's a big if I'm choosing the podium. But I think again, do you mean like who of the riders would be first, second, third?
Yeah, if you were to make a bet on the podium, what would you
Ah,
then
okay,
fill in?
okay. Um, oh, well, without offending anyone, I think I would say maybe Puck in first, Sheer in second, and Fem third.
Definitely possible. I think we'll be in for a very exciting race, and we wish you the best of luck, of course. Thank you for wanting to speak with us.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. It was great to talk to you and looking forward to the race. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you again for being here. We wish you the best of luck once again, and we hope you can secure a top 5. We will definitely be rooting for you. We will now proceed to talk with Caleb Swartz, one of the riders who is racing in the elite men category representing the home country, USA. Caleb, welcome on the podcast. Thank you as well for wanting to speak with us.
Thank you very much.
Could you shortly introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, so my name is Caleb Swartz. I am from Madison, Wisconsin, which is near Chicago in the Midwest. I currently live out in Missoula, Montana, which is out in the mountains, the Rocky Mountains, and I started racing cyclocross in 2008. And yeah, I've raced ever since.
This year, the World Championships are going to be held in the United States. Just the second time that they are held outside of Europe, also the second time they are held in the United States. Does that make this year extra special for you?
Yeah, definitely. I watched that first World Championships in 2013 that was held in the United States, and now 9 years later, I mean, to be able to race on our own home soil and in front of all of our friends and family and sponsors, it's a huge deal, especially to help American cyclocross grow and hopefully continue our future in the sport.
Do you think that this will help American cyclocross grow, perhaps in a similar way as what happened with Louisville, or did Louisville even have an effect at all?
It's hard to say about Louisville because I was younger. I was only 12 or 13 at the time, so it's hard to say. But I think there's definitely some growth after that. I think the Behind the Barrier series kind of really kicked into gear after that, and there's a lot of televised races and a solid series, and I think we're starting to see that again in the United States. Our series was televised again this past fall. We had new events, new calendar, new organization, new World Cups in the U.S. And I think it's a big deal for us as athletes and to have this opportunity. And I think it will help inspire a lot of younger riders, a lot of American riders, to see us all out there racing and see this big event being held here, and give them the chance to go watch it and dream, and in the same way I watched it 10 years ago and then started to dream. So
About the World Championships, they're going to be held in Fayetteville. In your category, the men's elite category, who do you think is the big favorite?
I think Pidcock for sure is the favorite. I think he's really been incredibly strong in the past block of racing, and he's he skipped his own nationals to train hard, and I think he's putting all his time and energy into the worlds, and I would be very surprised if he does not win at this point. I think he's shown what his form is, and especially when he applies himself like this by taking a 3-week or 4-week break from racing just for training, I think they'll make a big difference.
And do you think that the course suits him regardless of the weather conditions?
Not particularly. When it's in some ways, yes, because there's a big climb on the backside of the course that suits him very well, I think. But when it was muddy, it was pretty heavy course, similar to Dendermonde or Hulham, but he still won Hulham, and I think he's overall fit enough. He can win in almost any conditions without Wouter van der Poel there. And I think with all the climbing and the running, even if it's heavy, I don't think it'll be a problem for him.
It's interesting that you say that you think the conditions there were comparable with Dendermonde, because we also spoke with a couple of other riders. They said it was muddy, but not comparable with Dendermonde because it wasn't as deep mud. But perhaps by the time you raced the men's race, the mud got deeper than it was in the women's race, because after all, the riders who told this raced the women's race.
Yeah, I think it was definitely not as deep and unrideable, so there's less flat running. But for me, I felt like the effort in the legs, the leg strength it took to turn over the gear, super heavy, super low cadence. And it definitely rained throughout the women's race and into the men's race. And the women tore up the track even more. So I think by the time we raced in Fayetteville, it was definitely a different course from the women's race. And definitely not as deep and as much running as Dendermonde, but that same kind of just muscle fatigue from trying to push super low cadence, super high power was definitely similar, I think.
For now, they are predicting dry conditions, but the weather can still shift. They're a bit unsure. I've seen rain, I've seen even a bit of snow sometimes, I've seen a lot of variable temperatures. So in terms of weather, we'll wait and see. But you said regardless of the weather, Pidcock is the favorite. Who do you think is going to be his main challenger?
It's hard to say, but there's that next group of 4, Ely, Toon, and Van Toornout, and even Quinten Hermans. He won the World Cup there in October. So I think those 4 could really put up a fight, and I think they all know it's a huge opportunity without Wouter van der Poel. I think they all want that jersey as badly as Pidcock.
And then you also still have the likes of Laurens Sweeck, who says he thinks he can become world champion, and also the European champion, Lars van der Haar. So do you think that this group will be very closely bunched together for second place, or on a dry course, perhaps even stay with Pidcock for a long while?
Yeah, I forgot about Lars. Sorry, Lars. I think in the October did not spread out a ton. There were not huge gaps like other races. I think if it was dry, it could definitely be a big group for a while. There could be a lot of drafting. It could be very high speed.
Yeah, I've said this earlier before as well. I think in the dry you could have a similar type of race like we used to have in the late 90s, early 2000s. The courses then generally weren't as technical as the courses now. And Fayetteville, it does have a big feature, the big climb and the big stairs, and also this downhill, which includes a bit of corners. But it reminds me in a way of the course in Poprad, where the World Championships were, I think, in 99 or 97. So I think we could definitely go to a race that was similar to what we saw back then, large groups. And then the tactical part comes into play. Some riders deal with that better than others. Do you have any who you know from? Well, they are tactically just perfect.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think Pidcock has shown he's pretty adept tactically. I think Lars has also shown he's really able to make those hard decisions when it counts. I mean, look at his season winning and how he's prepared for some of those big events, Dutch Nationals, Euros. I think he's a little older. He has a little more experience. I think he has always struck me as a very, very smart racer and always made very good in race decisions.
That's for the big list of favorite and contenders for podium spots. Do you think that there's any American rider that could end up on the podium?
Gage was 8th there in the World Cup. So, I mean, there's some, and the gaps were not huge. So, I mean, I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it's hard to say for sure. I mean, it would take an incredible ride. And his 8th place finish was one of his best. I think probably he would probably say one of his best World Cup ride for sure. On a pretty perfect day there. So it's hard to say. Maybe, but it would be a miracle in some ways.
Yeah, I think unfortunately in the men's category it will be difficult for an American to end on the podium. Of course, the women's category is a different story with Clara Honsinger, and in the youth categories there's plenty of American talent coming through. I would already be very happy to see an American flag in the top 10, and that's perhaps possible with Gage Hecht, but also Curtis White has been close to World Cup top 10s this season. But a name that's completely gone under the radar is the American champion, Eric Berner. He didn't come to Europe to race. What do you think that he can do?
Yeah, I mean, Eric is an incredible rider. Eric was a rider I wished, he made his decisions for himself and was doing what was best to not come to Europe. But he was one person who I wished I could have seen race in Europe, because I really just wanted to see how well he could do, honestly. Yeah, I definitely should not discredit Eric. I'm mostly going off Gage's great race there last time, and same with Curtis. Both incredible riders, and it's hard to say what happens when you take 6 weeks off from racing to train. I mean, but you don't forget how to race your bike, and if you're accumulating all that fitness and all that rest, I mean, you can show up and do some pretty incredible things at Worlds. So I think there's no reason Eric wouldn't be able to have just a pretty incredible finish.
And I feel like he's completely going unmentioned, silent, under the radar, and that could also help him. I think that he's made incredible progression throughout the season. In the beginning of the season in the USCX series, which I watched on GCN, he already was a name that it was, hey, I haven't seen this name in the top 10, even of American races a lot. And then when we came to the World Cups, he was challenging for top 20s. But really, after that World Cup, it really took off for him. I think he won the King CX and then went on to claim another couple of victories before becoming PanAmerican champion and American champion. So, yeah, I think that's just been an incredible season by him. The progression he's made, if he can capitalize upon the fact that he already was 20th in Fayetteville, you can take out a couple of names in front of him because some of them aren't coming. Then there's a bunch of riders who he's now better than. He is definitely one of the riders that it wouldn't surprise me if he gets a top 10.
Yeah, I think that's definitely feasible. I think if he's continued that fitness and that growth since Nationals, took his rest, started to build up again, I think he's going to come in hungry, where a lot of other riders were coming in tired. Home course advantage. We've raced it before on home soil, home crowd, home fans. I think Eric on a good or great day, he could really do something spectacular like that.
And for yourself, what are your goals for this World Championship?
I think based on where I've been finishing in some of the World Cups in Europe and other things, I think with the field being a little smaller usually for the Worlds and a little different, and some riders there, some riders not, I think I'd really like to be inside the top 30 or top 25 I think I'm capable of riding inside the top 25 on a great day. I think that it'll be my first elite World Championships. I'm a first-year elite rider, so it's kind of going to be a baseline for hopefully future World Championships. I have to start somewhere, and I think I've learned a lot in Europe this past month, and then took some good rest, and I'm building up the fitness again. So I'll be ready mentally and physically, and I think if I have a fantastic day, I think I can be inside the top 25 for sure.
As you said, this was your first elite season. It was also the first season that you properly came over to Europe and do a bunch of races here. How was that for you?
Yeah, it was a great experience. I'd come over as a junior a couple times, did a few trips. I did one trip as a U23 and all 4 years as a U23. So this was the first time I'd come over and really done a full course period and hit that many races in such a short amount of time. And to do it as an elite rider was, a huge step up, obviously. So I think, overall I learned a lot. It was incredibly difficult. The level was just so high, it's so aggressive, it's so fast. The courses are more difficult, they're more technical, different features we don't see in the US. I think, it just raises that level of competition in my head. And then when I go back to do a race in the US next season, everything else here will feel, easy and slow motion. Starting first row every time instead of fifth row, and it's, you just start and you're sliding into the top 5, and there you go, you ride away, ideally, instead of, fighting for 30th and 35th and 40th, and dealing with traffic jams and everything else. I think definitely really shifts your perspective of what hard cyclocross is and makes everything else seem easy.
And do you think that it will be possible for you to make these trips to Europe for racing around the Christmas period on a yearly basis, or maybe at least bi-yearly basis?
I think so. Yeah, I run my own team for myself and have great support. I think, and I'm growing a solid amount this year. I think I should have the budget to do it next year, and I think I see a lot of value for my sponsors and partners to go race there in Europe and get that exposure. I think they're happy to see me do it and happy to support me there. I think it's also a very worthwhile investment in my development to continue to gather that experience, to continue to improve, because it takes so much more than just fitness and handling ability to race well in Europe. It definitely takes time to grow and put the pieces together. And yeah, I anticipate coming over and racing more in future years as much as I can.
That's definitely good news for yourself, but also for some of our listeners and followers, because we've had a couple of them write to us and ask if you were able to come that, because they had seen you in the broadcast of Gulligem and they had seen some of your vlogs and they really like that. So I think they will be happy with that.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I really will certainly plan to keep coming over. It's incredible. It's an incredible experience and I love it.
And then a question out of interest, out of the courses that you did here, which one was your favorite?
So for me, sometimes I end up liking a course where I perform better, even if it wasn't the most exciting course. So honestly, I really like Dendermonde because it was one of my better races, and I love to run. So even though it was very heavy and not, the most interesting course, I thought it was a good mixture of different features, and I love the running. And I love the heavy straight line mud. So I enjoyed that one. And then Houlihan was kind of similar, a lot of straight line mud, very little elevation, a lot of running. So I enjoyed that one again. But then I think Hulst was probably the coolest course I raced this trip around because it was totally new to me. Very dramatic features, a great background with the windmill and the fortress and everything. And that's one course. I know it's always been dry, but I think that's one course that would just be unbelievably challenging in full mud. Those drops and off cameras would be incredibly difficult.
Yeah, unfortunately, Hulst doesn't really tend to get muddy because there's this massive pond which drains all the water. But yeah, that could definitely be an exciting course if it ever would get muddy. And what were your experience with racing in Namur, which was in your first weekend here?
Yeah, that one was very difficult. I raced it once as a junior in 2016, so that was the old course. Yeah, I think I did Rookfin the day before, so that was a very, very high speed effort. And I'd flown in just a few days before that. So to do back-to-back World Cups after traveling across the ocean was definitely physically very challenging. And I was not in peak form on Sunday on a course where you really needed to be as fit and ready as possible to run and ride. So it was brutal, and the technical aspects of that race, it's just so difficult. It was, I think I learned a lot throughout my time in Europe, but that one in particular was, just to come straight over and jump into that was like, whoa, just incredibly difficult. Tons of rocks and roots and all those different drops and shoots were very tricky. I really enjoyed them. I thought they were cool. It was incredibly fun. But yeah, not easy and not something you can just show up and race and perform well at for the most part.
Well, next year, no Namur for you. It's hosting the European Championships and won't be in the World Cup. So unless you change your nationality, and even then, not enough time. So no Namur next year, but it will be replaced with other exciting courses. I'm sure of that. So, well, of course, good luck at the European or at the World Championships.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
And thank you for wanting to speak with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to do it. This is great.
The next rider we are speaking with is the PanAmerican champion in the junior women's category, Ava Holmgren. Ava, thank you for wanting to speak with us and welcome on the podcast.
Hello, thank you so much.
Could you shortly introduce yourself to our listeners?
My name is Ava Holmgren. I'm a 16-year-old cyclist from Ontario, Canada, and I ride for Team Hardwood Next Wave.
You will be racing in the junior women's category. What is your goal going to be there?
My main goal would probably be a top 5, but I really want that top 3 spot on the podium. That would be amazing. But with everything that has happened so far, I'm already satisfied with how my racing has been, and my season has been great, and I've already achieved so many goals. So anything that happens at the World Championships, I will be fine with.
You hope to end on the podium, you just said. Do you think that that's possible?
I think it is possible, especially for the 3rd spot, because every World Cup it's been a different person on the 3rd spot of the podium. So I'm hoping that it will be me this time. But the top 5 and I'd say the top 10 has been moving around a lot. So I've beaten some of the girls and they've also beaten me in different races. So I'm excited to see how it'll turn out.
Yeah, because behind the front 2 places, it's been very close. Zoe Bakstedt has won most junior women races, or I think actually all of the ones that she started. Leni Benfeld is the other very strong rider in the junior women category. Do you think that these two are also going to end 1st and 2nd at the World Championships, like has been the case through almost the entire season?
Yes, I think that is very possible. Zoe has been riding really strong all year, and I hope that she can make a quick recovery from her COVID-19 infection. It'll be really good to see her on that top step, because she's worked so hard, and you can just see it on her face after every race. And I also think that Leonie is also a very strong contestant, and that it is very possible that she will be second.
Perhaps Leonie Bentveld is maybe a bit more beatable in a way. Of course, I don't mean to disrespect any of your or your other competitors' performances, because Zoe is just incredibly talented, became world champion on the road as a first year, and this year also is riding very well with the elites. That doesn't mean that other riders in the junior women's category are not talented. They are, in my opinion, very overlooked. But we saw in Flamanville that Bentveld needed to fight with the Italian Corvi for the win. Eventually Bentveld won, but it came down to a sprint. So do you think that perhaps a second place would also be within reach? Or do you think that if we look at the entire picture of the season, that realistically a third place is the maximum achievable for most of the riders?
It is definitely possible to get that second place because Leonie's super fast, but not everyone is on the same level as like Zoe, because she's just so much better than everyone else. But yeah, I think she's like the next rider to really try and beat. And I think that it's possible if you have really good legs on that day, and maybe if you're having your best day. So I think that it's definitely possible, yes.
And you are one of the riders that hopes to do that, and as you said, you hope to end on the podium. You also said that it's very close in the top 5 and top 10. Who do you think are a couple of names that we should keep in our mind when we think about that third or maybe second spot on the podium?
Well, like we said, Leonie, and also the Italians. So Valentina and oh my gosh, I forget the other one. I'm so sorry.
That would be Venturelli, I guess.
And yes, Federica. I know that they'll be really strong. And also Zadie Bensonet. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right. And I would say Monique Halter, but I'm not sure if she is coming.
No, she is not coming. She is unfortunately not able to come due to school, actually.
All right. And the last one I would probably say Lauren Mollengrath. I know that she's been really strong and she has a lot of really fast starts, so she's definitely one to look out for.
It's definitely looking to be an exciting race there. Throughout the last couple of weeks, we've also seen a couple of Czech riders be able to come in the mix, and occasionally some of the French as well. Do you think that there's going to be a big group together on the parcours of Fayetteville? You rid there earlier this year.
Yes, I think that this is a course where you can really ride together in a group. I forgot to say this in the last question, but the Czech riders are also really, really fast, and they'll definitely be up there. And this course, like I just said, it's a lot easier to ride in a group because there aren't any really technical features that just have one line. So you can really ride even side by side on almost the whole course. So that's definitely a factor to keep in mind. And yeah, I think that it'd be really cool to see a group in this race to keep it more exciting.
I think it's important to mention that we are talking in a way that it's almost guaranteed that Zoe is going to win, which makes sense on the season, but I still want to say it, the race still needs to be ridden. She can have bad luck, and as you said, she had COVID, and we don't know how she will recover from that, so we need to be a bit cautious, but cautiously optimistic. Back to the course, you mentioned a list of names, and you talked about the course. Let's combine those two things. Who of the riders do you think suits this course the best?
I'd say whoever has the best legs on that day, mostly because from the race in October, I'm pretty sure, it wasn't super technical compared to the courses that I raced in Belgium and in the Netherlands. But I think that if the weather changes and if it's muddy again, obviously that adds some technical ability that you need to win. So I really don't know. I think that whoever has the best legs will definitely excel.
Do you think that then it comes really down purely to who is able to put down the most power, because the parkour doesn't have any major features except that one climb. It's not like Koksijde, or where you have a lot of sand, or Namur, where you have this off-camera and climbing where you can really make a difference.
Yes, I do think power will be a very important part of how your performance goes, especially because it's a fast course in the dry conditions, but when it rains, even though there's still that technical ability that you need, the ground was really, really soft, so it felt like a tractor pull. Nothing compared to Dendermonde, but still that uphill was a really big leg sucker. And yeah, I think that it plays a big part in the course.
Weather will, of course, be decisive there what type of race we'll get. For now, the weather predictors can't really agree. Some say rain, some say dry, but what is for sure is that we are going to have some close racing there. You said for yourself that you are targeting a podium. You came over to Europe to race around the Christmas period. Would you want to tell us a bit about how that went for you?
First of all, it was an amazing experience. My first race was Namur, and it was a real eye-opener, let's just say that. Namur is one of the most technical courses, and when I pre-rode it for the first time, the first downhill, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much steeper than on TV, because I have watched a bunch of the races at home in Canada, and then I finally got to race them, and it was just such a cool experience, especially for the junior races, because the field was so much bigger, and I don't really have that many riders to race against in Canada. And obviously there's a bigger field in the United States, but this was just on another level in Europe. I think my biggest takeaway from racing in Europe was being able to adapt. It was either being able to adapt to the course conditions, my starting position. So I was on the front row in the junior races, but then for the elite World Cups, I was like around 5th row. And so I think that being able to adapt like that is a really important ability to have as a racer, especially as a young racer. And I'm really proud of how everything went.
You already mentioned that Namur is a technical course. Gullegem, the race which you won, is also a technical course with quite some corners. Is that something that suits you, the technical courses?
I think it is. I really like it when there's technical courses, and especially the downhill, so that I can recover a little bit more. I come from more of a mountain biking background than a road background, so the mountain biking definitely helps me in the more technical courses. And then in like Namur and Hulst, and then in Lowenhout or Azencross, it was technical, but it was pretty flat. And so I didn't have my best race there, but I find that I can really do my best on the technical courses. And so, yes, I do think they suit me.
And judging by how you talk, you seem to be a pretty all-round rider that can do well on every type of course, also considering your mountain bike background.
For sure. I really want to be an all-round biker in cross on the different parcours, but also in the different disciplines. So I really want to do well in as many disciplines as I can. So mountain bike, cross, and road. But maybe this year I'll try a downhill course. I think it's really fun, and I like the technical aspect of that.
If you ask me, downhillers are crazy people who have no fear. You could never see me do downhill. Cross and road, that was enough for me. But will you be trying to combine cross and road with mountain bike throughout the next couple of seasons?
Yes, I would really like to do that. It's definitely hard when there's like a mountain bike race at the same time as a road race. So I'll be trying really hard to get as many in as possible as I can. Doing all the different races and disciplines really adds some excitement and fun for me. So I think that if I only did one, or like if I only did road or just mountain bike, it might get boring at sometimes. But either way, I still love biking, and it's my all-time favorite sport. So I'm good with anything.
And is there any of those disciplines that is your preferred one?
I really, really love mountain biking, but cross is definitely up there because of the environment, of the crowds, and I really like the race length, and just everything about it is, there's just so much to love.
Mountain biking and cross are in some aspects also pretty similar. And if you were to put a long time goal on your cyclocross or mountain bike career, not necessarily a goal, a dream, better, a dream, what would be your ultimate dream in both disciplines?
My ultimate dream would be to make cyclocross and mountain biking my job, or become a pro athlete and make it my profession. But for more of like a performance goal, I'd say make it to the Olympics for mountain biking. And hopefully when I'm old enough, cyclocross will also be part of the Olympics. That would be just amazing.
That would certainly be amazing if cyclocross becomes Olympic, or if you can participate in, I think Paris is maybe a bit too early, but you never know, at least the Olympics. But if you mentioned that your goal is to make a living out of cyclocross or mountain bike, or ideally combining them. How is that in Canada? Because we see Magali Rochette race here. We see also Ruby West came over a couple of times, and on the men's side, Michael van der Ham. But we don't really know what's behind it. Most of them do it with private sponsors. It makes it seem to us that it's difficult for Canadians to really get a team that has funding. Is that also the case?
Yes, I do think that it's a lot more difficult for Canadians. And we can really see that in the cyclocross aspect, because our nationals were canceled twice, and that was our only chance of getting points in UCI points in our own country. So that means that we have to travel a lot more. I've been down to the States quite a few times for the races here. And obviously going across continents is not cheap. It's very expensive. So I do think it's a lot harder, but if you put in the hard work and stay determined and focused, I think that it is possible to make a living out of it, like Magali Rochette. And it would also really help to get onto a pro team, possibly in Europe. I think that would help a lot. So yes, I do think it's difficult, but that's just the way it is. And I'm ready to push harder to reach that goal.
Yeah, hopefully European teams will eventually get interested, but for now you need to fund it yourself. How was your trip to Europe funded this year?
So yeah, it was pretty good. I set up a GoFundMe on my Instagram page, and I had some very generous donors. I also worked in 2020, and I'm currently on a leave of absence because of racing, and I'm not in my town right now. So working definitely helped with that financial need, but it's hard to do for me, it's hard to do a part-time job, train, and also do school. So that's why I had to leave for a bit.
We will be adding that link of your GoFundMe in our description, so if people are interested in donating, they can do that there. But first, the World Championships. You could become the first Canadian to ever win a medal at the World Championships cyclocross across any category. What would that mean to you? What would it do with you?
Well, obviously I will celebrate, but getting the medal is just would be just part of the process, and it would also help me for next year and give me that extra boost of confidence in my training, but also in the racing for the next season to come.
And you're only a first year. Next year you become second year. Do you then think that next year, also when Zoe and Leonie move out to the under 23 category, do you then think that next year maybe you can aim for the world title?
Yes, I do think that I could aim for the world title, but there's also a lot of really strong first years that could also go for it. And one of my goals for next year would be to actually get a World Cup win. And another one would be to get one of those rubber duckies. So that means winning one of the Bad Cameras trophy. And yeah, that's just more of like a fun goal, obviously, but the World Cup win would be amazing.
And would it be extra special if you could be on the podium together with your sister over World Cup or the World Championships?
For sure, that would be just that would be so cool. I really like racing with my sister because I always know that I can have someone to hug at the finish line. But being on the podium would be just another experience. It would be so cool.
I can definitely imagine that that would be special. A final question to round off. You are going to participate in just the second World Championships for junior women, and still not all races have junior women races. Could you tell us a bit about the differences and how it helps your development that you have the opportunity to race against riders of your own age and not always against the elites?
I really think that it's helped develop myself and also the other junior riders because we get to experience what it's like to be near the front or at the front or even on like the first row at the start line, because we wouldn't get that unless we have like a whole bunch of points. We wouldn't get that opportunity in the elite World Cups or even any of the elite races. So I think it's really helping the junior women by giving them that chance to see what it's like to be at the top and giving that extra bit of confidence. And also just to have like their own category really means a lot, because in Zolder, there was only the elite category. There wasn't really a junior race. And so there were over 100 people on the start line, and that really affects your performance if you're near the back, because the first few turns, it can, let's say it's like a really big bottleneck. I guess the leaders are getting so many seconds right off the bat and you can't really do anything. And we really saw that in Hulst. One of the first few turns, I was just standing there and I couldn't really do anything. And it kind of sucked seeing all the other riders right away. But if you look at the World Cups, the Junior World Cups, it was a much better experience and I could really push myself harder, especially right off the bat. So I think that having our own category is really going to step up for women's cycling. And I hope to see more of those step ups.
Yeah, we of course also hope that and wish you the best of luck at the World Championships. Thank you for wanting to speak with us.
Thank you so much. See you there.
We will now proceed to talk with the PanAmerican champion in the men under 23 category, Scott Funston. Scott, welcome on our podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me. As you mentioned, I'm from the United States. I'm currently a senior in mechanical engineering at Colorado Mesa University, and I race for the Blue Composition Cycles presented by Build team. And I'm a last year U23, really looking forward to the World Championships coming up in a couple of weeks.
Those World Championships, they are held in Fayetteville. It's in your own country. Could you tell us what makes that extra special for you?
For sure. Having family and friends there is definitely something. My dad has been a huge role in my cycling journey, and he's never seen me race the World Championships until now because it's in the United States. So that's certainly something I'm looking forward to. I have some of my college roommates are coming out just to cheer on because it's so close. So it's really exciting, and I look forward to having that community there compared to being over in Europe where it's just kind of the racers and mechanics.
Yeah, well, what you call close for Europeans, it's a very long drive, but it's definitely cool to see that all your family and also some of your friends will be coming there. earlier this year, you already raced the World Cup there. Could you tell us what you remember from the parcours? What is it like?
It's an interesting course. Pretty not super technical. The big features are the climb, I think they call it. It's about 45 seconds, maybe a minute if it's really muddy, and then the stairs. But I think it's mainly the climb. That, like any course, the weather really changes it. But in the dry, it's extremely fast, pack racing, and then in the wet, it's a really we call it a diesel effort. It's just really steady power, not so punchy. So yeah, it'll be interesting. See what changes they make. Hopefully make it a little more technical. A few sections where you have to kind of stop and start a little more would be nice.
It's difficult to compare it with other tracks, but what would you say this track comes close to in terms of other races?
I would almost say Zolder, but without the big drops and kind of the cool parts of Zolder almost. And it does have the stairs. But yeah, it's really maybe like the start straight at Zolder was the climb. That would be kind of comparable. And then everything else is pretty flowy. And yeah, I don't know. It is hard to compare.
And on this type of parkour, of course, the weather will play a big role, but what type of race do you expect here?
Me looking at the weather, I honestly don't think it'll be muddy. I think it's tending towards being dry. And so I'm a bit imagining. I watched the European Championships, obviously didn't compete in it, but the U23 field had a big group until pretty late into the race. So I'm kind of expecting something similar to that if it's dry.
I think that that's definitely possible because if you look at the course of the European Championships, it also had one big climb. The big climb there was mainly on tarmac and with headwind, made it hard to break away. Fayetteville has a bit more technical sections with the stairs in it, which you didn't have at the Van Berg. I also heard that there was going to be an addition of a loop with some sort of Belgian stairs, so maybe a bit more technical, but yeah, I think it could definitely go towards a closed race. And I mean, you've been racing in the under 23 category yourself, so you probably know it better than I do, but who do you think would be the main contenders on a fast parkour?
I haven't been up there in the front groups, but I mean, my guess would be Ryan Camp clearly is strong, and then Verstringen. I think that's Emily Verstringen. I think that's how you pronounce his name. He's clearly on a good run of form, and him, and if Thibaut gets healthy, I'd say those guys would be the main competing for the podium. Maybe Cameron Mason. The Dendermonde ride was well, but I don't foresee that being kind of similar to the Fayetteville course. I guess if it's muddy, it takes a similar type of power profile, but pretty different courses.
Yeah, the weather will be very important, and I mean, normally you don't even need rain on race day at the World Championships because there's so much pre-riding that even if it rains the weekend before and there's a lot of water in the ground, that it will become muddy. Of course, Fayetteville, it's kind of an artificial parkour. They rolled grass there, so it's also a question how that will hold with the rock ground underneath. But I think it will definitely be interesting to see what's going to happen with the parkour. And then if it's going to be a fast race, I agree the names that you mentioned. Thibaut Nys, today he got the news from his team doctor that he was fine to race, so he's going to be racing. Of course, we don't know how his shoulder is going to hold during the race. We'll get more information on that in Hamme, where he races the Under-23 race. But what do you think of Mace Hendricks, the winner of the Under-23 World Cup?
Yeah, Mace. I definitely missed Mace. He's riding strong. Like I said, I haven't, besides starting near those guys, I haven't raced with them too much. I've been more fighting in the teens or trying to break into that top 10 has been my area. So, and then what is it? It's Jens Michels. He seems to be, he was really strong at Belgian nationals and had some good run of form. So that would be another one I would assume.
Yeah, there's just so many riders because in recent weeks also Joran Viseur has put his name to the front of the selections. He was, I think, third at the Belgian National Championship, so definitely going to be a close race. For yourself, what is your goal going to be? You mentioned you were fighting for top 10 places. Is that also what you're aiming to do at the World Championships?
Yeah, top 10 is what I think is within capabilities for me. I think it would take a good race, especially on a fast course that's not my forte. So I think that would take a good start and riding really smart to finish up there. But yeah, that's definitely something I would be proud of.
And how do you, for yourself, deal with the pressure of a championship? From the top of my head, this is your second World Championship, but this year you also raced the Nationals and Continental Championships in the USA. How do you deal with it? Do you see it as just any other race, or is there always something extra in the back of your head?
It's definitely more than just the average race. I think I've been racing nationals since I was just a kid. So over all the years, I've really learned to take the nervousness and pressure and just like turn it kind of into excitement. Like I'm almost more excited for Worlds than nervous, just because, as I mentioned, it's all my friends and family are there. It's a really an opportunity for me to race in front of them, and I'm really excited about that. So I think less pressure and more excitement, I think.
And this year, then, you already raced two championships, as said. You won both. Was that something that you expected, or was that also something that came a bit of a surprise? Because last year there was no racing at all for you.
Those were goals of mine. That week was a um, big week. Like had kind of a peak for that. And yeah, Pan Am's was definitely a bit nervous for that. Like really wanted that title, and it came down to a really close sprint finish with Tyler Clark from Canada, and so that was a very hard race. But nationals, I took a lot of confidence going from that win going into nationals, and I felt like the nationals course suited me well. So I think that I was maybe slightly less nervous and just really wanted to go out and have a clean race, which I was able to do.
And those two races were in America. You've also raced in Europe throughout this year. Would you say that the Fayetteville course leans more towards a European course or a typical American course?
That's a hard question. I would say on the level of technicality, it's definitely an American style course. But something that we were talking about when we were over in Europe, if with the USA camp, was how at least certain American races lack big long straightaways and longer sections, but the Fayetteville course actually does have a few of those sections, and so kind of split in between, I'd say. But I'd say more it's kind of an American style course.
And do you like the American type of parkour better than the European type of parkour?
I would say definitely like the European weather. I enjoy racing in the mud, and we actually have very few races like that in the U.S. I guess the World Cups we got lucky, but other than that, almost all our UCI weekends have been dry. So definitely the weather, and yes, certain of the courses I prefer in Europe. The balls and I really enjoyed like Ball Holst. Herentals was cool as well. So I'd say I kind of prefer the European races, but honestly, I think some of the American races just with weather with some rain or even just general moisture would definitely be an improvement.
Yeah, now there's an opportunity that it perhaps does end like the World Cup in terms of conditions. Do you then also hope for that yourself, that it is a muddy course?
Yeah, Fayetteville, I would definitely hope for a muddy course. I think it would suit me better than I'm assuming in the dry it would be a pack race. Maybe the hill is enough that it would break up, but I think yeah, the mud always suits me. Growing up in I grew up in the Northwest, which is a really muddy part of the United States. And so spent a lot of time riding, training, racing in the mud. Yeah, and I think it suits my power a little bit, my power profile a little better. I'm not huge into the road racing. More come from a mountain bike background. So the sheer leg speed is something I struggle with and need to improve upon.
Yeah, and then that's also, if you look at the races you did, you ended ninth in Baal. That was a muddy race. And also in Herentals, which was not as muddy, but you got 2 top 10s in Europe. And I think that must have been very nice for yourself to get your, I think, first top 10s in European races.
Yeah, it was great to Ball. I was really happy with. The first part of the trip, I was not. I wanted a little more out of the U23 World Cups. I'd hope to be in the teens or maybe even top 10, but I was in the 20s is what it is. But yeah, Ball was really good. And then, yeah, Herentals was, I'm happy with ninth. It wasn't the deepest field. And I was pretty tired from, I think that was race 7 of the block or so. So yeah, I was pretty tired on that one. So I did as best as I could. But yeah, Ball was a really good result. And I was pleased with my ride in Holst in the elite field as well.
And if we look a bit further, what does your future in cycling look like for yourself?
Current plan right now is to continue with my blue competition team into next year as a first full year elite. I'm gonna stay in Colorado. I'm gonna move to like kind of the opposite side of the mountains since I'll be graduating college to be closer to my team. But focus on the UCI races in the fall, probably really focus on the US rounds, the World Cups, and then obviously PanAm's nationals are always big races for Americans. And then hopefully make it over to Europe again for at least the Christmas block. If not, maybe, I don't know what the schedule looks like, but maybe through Worlds. Not sure where the funding will be or what, but it would be nice to race a similar season to what I did this year.
And that's cyclocross, but cyclocross season is only in the winter. What do you do in the summer?
This summer plan is to do a little bit of mountain bike racing and road racing, hoping to kind of increase my road presence a little bit. Not going to be really on a team. My teammate, Eric, he was a decently well-established U23 racer. And so hopefully we can kind of hit some races together. It's not like a full team, but just try and get some racing in the legs. I know there's a big race here in Grand Junction it's a kind of a marathon style mountain bike race, and that has good prize money. So it's definitely something that I'll be targeting. That's in May. Mountain bike nationals are in Colorado in July. So that's something I'll do. And also considering going to the snowshoe mountain bike World Cup, since I'll still be a U23 and it's at least stateside. It's opposite side of the US, but it's within the States. So those are kind of some of the events I've got my eyes on. Really more trying to get through Worlds and then in February lock in a schedule of what I want to do.
About the road racing, what does road racing look like in the USA? In the Netherlands, or not per se the Netherlands, but in Europe we know cyclocross riders, most of them ride for a UCI team. They race some UCI races like the Baloise Belgium Tour, or they race some local stage races which still get quite some exposure. But what does that look like in the USA?
For me, I would definitely start my season with the collegiate road team. I would race with my school, which is not a super high level, but for me it's good. I'm not that experienced on the road. I don't do a ton of specific training towards it, so not super strong. And then after that, it would be, honestly, looking at the schedule, it's probably going to be more local stuff. Had hoped to do some of the bigger races in the US, maybe like the Redlands Classic, or we've got a lot of crit racing that we do. So that's definitely an option to do a few of those, maybe some of the bigger ones. But yeah, we're where the schedule pans out, and we don't have a ton of resources for the summer. I think we put more of it towards the cyclocross season. So as much like how easy is it to get to a race and how expensive as like the type of racing.
Yeah, funding is always an issue for basically anyone that's racing, but I mean, I can imagine that that's even more difficult for you because most of the racing eventually at the end of the day takes place in Europe and you are on the other side of the ocean, so it must be a costly trip to come to this side to do racing, even if it's just for a relatively short amount of time in the Christmas period.
Yeah, it is. It's expensive and it's very taxing. Just come the flight over there. You have to get there 3-4 days early, even just to get adjusted into this time zone before you do your first race, or at least to do it right. You know, you could go sooner, but it would definitely not be ideal. And then coming home, I mean, yeah, I did a lot of racing, but also just the transatlantic flight. I took almost a week, just really easy to let the body rest and recover. It's not quite the same as driving your camper a few hours.
And is that maybe also why your teammate, you already just mentioned him, Eric Brunner, he became national champion in the elite category? Is that part of the reason why he couldn't come over in the Christmas period?
Yeah, he was in November when we were trying to figure all the logistics out. He was feeling a little burnt. He'd done a pretty big road season. I think he'd spent 3 weeks in Europe, like 3 weeks before he started the cross season. So they kind of blended together and then jumped right into cross season and did the whole UCI calendar there. So yeah, he was feeling pretty burnt and ready for a break. Clearly the form was there, but sometimes the body and mind are at different spots. And also, as you mentioned, the finances, it was going to be pretty. Luckily, I, as a development category rider, received support from USA Cycling to like on the ground there. Once I got there, most of my all the mechanics and everything, there was no fees for that. But unfortunately, him in the elite category, they don't get the same amount of funding, so it was gonna be expensive.
Yeah, that's a real shame. But he's having an amazing season, and he is riding the World Championships. What do you think he can do there?
I don't know. It would be I would hope top 20 for sure. With maybe not the deepest field, everyone coming. I know Gage Hecht went top 10 at Fayetteville at the World Cup there, so I think maybe a top 10 could even be possible for Eric, or if Gage or Curtis have the right day. I think those three have the potential to be in the low teens or maybe crack the top 10.
Yeah, I think on a very good day we could see one of the Americans in the top 10 and otherwise just outside of the top 10, especially as you said, because not all countries are filling their squads due to their financial issues, because a bit on that, the COVID has reduce the amount of flights, and that leaves that the flights that are there being extra expensive, and especially the intercontinental flights to Fayetteville are very hard to get on. That's at least the latest that we've heard on that. So that's a shame, but for you, when will you be heading there? Because for you it's probably less of an issue to travel there than it was to get to this to Europe.
Yeah, I'll be flying on Wednesday the 26th. It's for me, it's just a normal travel day. All the UCI racing I do is I live I'm like the wrong side of the mountains from like Denver. I'm just at a regional airport, so basically anywhere I go is a 2 flight with connection, and that's what it is to Fayetteville. So it's only like 5-6 hours in travel time. So yeah, not too bad for me.
Well, we wish you good luck there, and thank you for wanting to talk with us.
Thank you again. Yeah, it was great talking to you.
Well, that was the interview with Scott Funston. We will now speak with our final rider, Ian Akert. He ended second at the PanAmerican Championships for junior men and will be representing Canada at the World Championships. Ian, welcome on the podcast.
Hi, how's it going?
I'm doing fine. What about you?
I'm doing pretty good.
That's good to hear. Could you shortly tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah. My name is Ian Ackert. I'm a Canadian cyclocross and mountain bike racer. I race for Team Hardwood Next Wave, which is based out of Ontario. And I like to cook. I like to listen to music. And when I'm not on the bike, I like to play golf. So, yeah.
Well, no playing golf now, full focus on the World Championships. You already told me that you are already in Fayetteville. Tell us a bit about your journey there and what you're doing there between now and the World Championships.
Yeah, so we left on Monday from Canada. We left a snowstorm where we got about 3 feet of snow overnight. So it took a little longer to get out than we expected. We drove on Monday to St. Louis, which was 12 hours, and then finished the drive on Tuesday and got out for a little ride. And now we're just full force training behind the motorbike. We got one here and just continuing training as normal, just in the sun in Fayetteville.
And who are you training with?
I'm here with Ava and Isabella Holmgren and my coach Rob Holmgren for this week. And then starting next week, the Cycling Canada camp will begin, and I will be here with the 26 other athletes from Canada.
You also already told me that yesterday you went to the course. You saw a bit there, but you saw most when you were here for the World Cup earlier this year. What type of parkour is it?
I would say this course is a very power-oriented course. It's not super technical. I'd say that in the dry, it'll be a lot of group racing, and that in the mud, if it rains, it'll get super slippery, but nothing like any Belgian mud race, since it's not a race in the field. It's all laid down fresh grass, so it'll just be super slippery. Yeah, it'll be a good one.
Yeah, it's probably one of the more weather-dependent courses out there due to perhaps the lack of a major feature except the one very big climb. What type of weather are you hoping for yourself?
I would like some mud. I am really a technical rider, so slippery, fast, slippery conditions are my favorite, but if it's dry, I won't complain either.
And you said if it's dry, you think it will be close racing, group racing. The big favorite in your category is David Haverdings based on this season. I think he only lost maybe 3 or 4 races this year, which is a pretty insane stat. Do you think that if it's a dry race, even for him it will be difficult to break away?
I think that in this course, if he doesn't break away by the first lap, it'll be hard. First or second lap, it'll be hard. The way that I found that he's broken away is in like the super tight corners or remounting onto your bike. He's always the faster one, and he just gains the 1 second. And on this course, there's only the really big stair set. So if he can gain that extra second going into the big drop after that, I think that he could break away from that, but it would be hard on this course to break away.
And if it's hard to break away, who are the riders you expect to remain close to David?
Probably Aaron, Nathan, he's very strong. Probably Jordi and Kane Demore. I could see them up there for sure.
Yeah, so one of the names you mentioned, the European champion, Aaron Dox, he's been struggling throughout recent weeks. However, all the juniors we've spoken with, on and off the record, do still tip him for a potential very dangerous outsider. What is this based on? Do you think that it's the parkour that suits him, or is he a very good peaker, or why do you see Dox as perhaps the main challenger of David?
In my racing experience with him, he's always started a little bit slower, and then kind of at the end of the race, he's been on the podium or top 5. So I think that in this race, if he is able to have a good start, he can definitely stay with David. So if he's been working on that to have a better first 10 minutes in the race, I believe that that's where he can challenge David for sure.
And he did, after all, become European champion on the Vanberg. You were not able to race yourself there, but perhaps you've seen a couple of things of that course. Do you think that those two courses are comparable, the World Championships and European Championships?
Yeah, the European Championships didn't look like a super technical course. It just looked a little bit muddy and like a drag race, basically. So, yeah, I believe that you could compare these two courses. There's not much to them, couple climbs. So, yeah.
I think Docs is definitely a name we shouldn't count out. Other names you mentioned were De Moyer, Smith, and Courses. What about the PanAmerican champion, Jack Spranger? You also raced against him quite a lot this year. What do you think he can do?
He is another one for sure up there. I've been racing him since September, and he's got the power for sure. He's got the skill, even though the course is lacking a little bit, maybe. Yeah, I believe he could also be top 5, definitely fighting for the podium. I believe he still has front row start, so that's a huge help as well.
Certainly a help, but in this course it's super wide, so overtaking should be less of an issue than, for instance, in Namur, where it's single track pretty quickly. We also, in that race in Namur, saw very strong Nathan Smith. He eventually had a puncture, which then caused him to drop back whilst he was leading. Do you think that he is maybe a bit overlooked, because in recent weeks he wasn't able to come to the racing on my side of the channel, the European mainland? Bad luck at the British Championships, gone a bit under the radar because of that, and I feel like the European media mainly has their attention on Haverdings and a bunch of Belgians. But do you think that he's then maybe a bit overlooked, and that he should actually be considered maybe the second, third, or fourth favorite?
Yes, for sure. I think that he's been consistent all through the year, and a little bad luck, I believe, is not gonna count him out of the race. There was a couple races where I was top 10 with him, and then he just would ride away. So he's very strong, and I think that the course can suit him very well. So I don't think that anybody should count him out at all. I think that he's definitely a podium contender.
One of my personal outsiders is Viktor Van Der Berger. Do you think that this course suits him?
Yeah, definitely. I've raced with him, but being a first year coming from Canada, I don't really know everybody and all their styles. So I believe that if anybody really is very powerful and they can just push for 45 minutes, I believe that they can do good on this course.
There, of course, another bunch of outsiders. From Italy, you have Paletti. From France, you have Lesseur and Lequet. So it's definitely going to be shaping up to be an interesting battle for the podium positions. To come back to Haverdings, who we mentioned earlier, do you think that it's possible to beat him?
I believe that if he doesn't crack under any type of pressure, if he feels pressure coming into this race, I believe that it's definitely doable, but it's going to be very hard. I think that after not having a season last year, I think he's fully focused this year to kind of like end off his junior campaign. So I think it's going to be very hard to beat him.
It's proven to be very difficult this year already. I think only Docs and Courses and one other rider have been able to beat him. I think, maybe Docs won both races. I think 2 riders have been able to win a race where Haverdings was at the start. So it's definitely going to be difficult. But you said the pressure, it can definitely play a role, and Haverdings at the European Championship said that the pressure did get to him. So it could definitely be possible that pressure plays a role and that he then doesn't win. But it's shaping up definitely behind that to be an interesting battle. Let's focus on yourself a bit. With what goals are you going to be starting the race?
My goal after racing in Europe and having experience racing with all of these Belgians and Dutch and Great Britain riders, my goal for myself is top 15. I believe that I can be there and perform with that. This year I haven't had much of a goal. It's kind of just go over to Europe and learn how to race cross at that level. As a first year, I haven't had any expectations for myself, but now knowing where I can be, that's top 15 is, I think, a good goal for myself.
And as you said, you're only just first year, so I think considering you got a couple of podiums and also top 10 places over here racing in Europe, you definitely learned how to do that here in Europe, and you should be probably very happy with those results that you got.
Very, yeah. It's every race for me, I just looked at all the positives and I felt like I was winning more and more, and there was more positives. And then to get those two podiums was a very big deal. I don't think many Canadians have done that. So that was pretty awesome to me.
And also a sixth place in Zolder, which arguably had one of the stronger start fields this season. So do you think that if you have a very good day, even a top 10 is possible at the at the World Championships?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I believe that top 10 is doable. I just don't want to set a top 10 and then not be happy with my result, because there's always next year.
Yeah, and then next year, I think you can then raise the bar based on this year and use this as a learning experience. It's your first World Championship. You did race the PanAmerican Championships, but I mean, I've never raced the World Championships, but I only know the difference between a regional and a national championships, and in terms of pressure, that's already a huge difference. So I think even between a continental and World Championships, it's probably a major difference in experience and pressure you put on yourself.
For sure, yeah. Going into Pan American Championships, I had raced with Jack and Andrew August and all the Americans many times. I think we did like 8 races in 4 weekends, which for America was pretty big. So we got to know each other and how we raced. So I knew that I could be on the podium. And going into Worlds, only having a couple races with everyone before and then having this big block in between that kind of is like no man's land for us North Americans because we come home early. I think that the way that I'll prepare my mental is a little different.
I personally think that the riders who came home to the States or Canada early will have an advantage this year. All the European riders, they will first of all be dealing with jet lag, and now I think that might not be the biggest issue, but the bigger issue is that all the riders who come from Europe need to test negative before they leave, and that leads to riders being pretty stressed. David Haverdings told us that he had a nightmare a couple of times that he tested positive after the World Cup in Hogerheide. He's now sleeping at his grandma's place in isolation for an entire week, so he doesn't potentially get infected by his little brother who goes to school again. And that's obviously going to bring more and more stress compared to you who went home earlier and can take a relatively relaxed approach. At least come over to me here as somebody who's sitting here relaxed. He's already at the place, he's already seen, he knows what he wants to do, and at the end, if it happens, then you are happy, and then if it doesn't happen, doesn't seem to me like if you don't end in the top 10 but end 15th or 16th, I think you can still be happy. And a relaxed approach, fresh mental mindset, I think that's very important.
For sure. Yeah. I've never been one to kind of beat myself up on a result. So yeah, if 15, 16, I'm still going to be happy. Just getting the chance to race at World Championships is already huge. And yeah, coming down early, I think was a very good call. We drove down, so we weren't in the airport. We weren't packed in a plane with a bunch of people. We've even just the four of us have been testing every day just to make sure. We've just been at the house, go to grocery shop or ride. So yeah, it's been very chill here. There's a good vibe, no stress really. Yeah, it's pretty good right now.
Then to finalize this part of the podcast, there is also this mixed relay event this year at the World Championships. Will you be participating in that?
I haven't heard yet. I'm pretty sure we'll hear this weekend or the beginning of next week once the Cycling Canada camp starts. I've witnessed it a couple times. I've watched when mountain bike world championships were in Mont Saint Anne in Quebec. It looks like a really cool event, and if I got to participate in it, I would be very excited, and I believe that it'd be very fun.
And then I think the Dutch aren't participating based on what I heard in terms of under 23 riders who aren't participating. I do not know if the Belgians are participating, but seeing their selection, also that will be tough. Perhaps another chance of getting a rainbow jersey, because at the end of the day you do get an official one.
Yep, that would be very cool. I do know that we are putting a team in. I think that it'd be very hard to beat the Belgians, and even the American team could be very strong, especially because it's on home turf for them. I wouldn't count out the Canadians. We've got some pretty strong riders. So yeah, it'd be pretty cool to come home with a jersey.
Can definitely imagine that you would be happy with that. We wish you the best of luck, and we will keep an eye out on the start list of the mixed relay to see if you will be participating there, and of course best of luck in the men's junior race.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, Ian, good luck at the World Championships. And with that, we have concluded our second part of the World Championships preview. You've heard from 5 riders. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and you are now fully prepared for the World Championships. Mixed relay today on Friday, and then on Saturday the first 3 races, junior women followed by men under 23 and then women elite, and on Sunday the men's junior race followed by the women under 23 and the men elite. Enjoy the racing this weekend. We will be making 2 podcasts about it, so we will hopefully see you guys again there. Goodbye.